Make thousands of people redundant right before Christmas. They're also not being upfront with New Zealanders about how much extra borrowing they're going to undertake in order to fund their tax cuts plans. They are not being upfront with New Zealanders about what this is going to do for inflation, which is going to undoubtedly mean that inflation will stay higher for longer. Every day, their plans continue to fall apart. They're still not being upfront with New Zealanders. I think, given that we've now got just over 2 weeks until New Zealanders can start voting, I think it's time for the National Party to really front up and give New Zealanders the answers that they deserve.
You're at the camp,
Lloyd.
Those 17 days has numerous times who's facing questions about this. Would he do that as Prime Minister? Can he just, is that Prime Ministerial behaviour?
As Prime Minister, you have to be accountable for your actions. You have to be accountable for the things that you're putting before the New Zealand public. You can't just walk away when the going gets tough. If Christopher Luxon is walking away from tough questions as Leader of the Opposition, I don't think that he would cope with this kind of scrutiny that you get as Prime Minister.
Just on the numbers though, don't the polls show that the public just don't care? That he doesn't want to front on the numbers, they don't care if he walks up and stand-ups, they support him.
I think what it shows is that over the next, I think it's 16 odd days before polling opens, we've got a job to do to ensure that New Zealanders know the implications of National's plans. The fact that their numbers don't add up means that there are going to be deep cuts to our public services. It means that there won't be the money that we need for health and for education and for housing and to continue the momentum on all of the things that we've actually been getting good momentum on in recent years, and it will actually leave New Zealand worse off as a country.
But do you accept though that on the polls it shows that people want that, they want those cuts?
I don't think New Zealanders want to see first home buyers shut out of the housing market in favour of overseas investors. I don't think New Zealanders want to see house prices going up. I don't think New Zealanders want to see that we are consigned to being a nation of renters rather than a nation of homeowners. These are all things that we're going to be debating in the next few weeks.
On the 8% cuts in the public service, do you have any sense as to how many jobs that could be?
It would, if they want to do that before Christmas, which is what Nicola Willis has publicly said she wants to do, that would be thousands of people being laid off right before Christmas.
You've just spent the opening preamble here at an Etu Union launch for the campaign, talking about the National Party, and you did it yesterday, you've been doing it all throughout the campaign trail. Are you too outwardly focused on the National Party and not really looking enough at the Labour Party?
No, I think New Zealanders do deserve the answers to these questions. They're quite fundamental to the type of country that we would end up with under a National Act New Zealand First government.
Just on the topic, if I could just follow up, just on the topic of workers' right, the Green Party have come out and
You
said
always stand right in my left ear, but that's okay.
It's a good tactic. The Green Party have come out with a plan to increase annual leave to 5 weeks a year. Obviously, it's 4 weeks at the moment. What's your response to that? Is that something that you would be willing to think about if you're in a coalition with the Greens?
We've worked over the last 6 years to improve the lot of workers, including reinstating rest and meal breaks. We've got a new public holiday, Matariki. We've extended sick leave, so we're pretty proud of our track record there. I don't think now's the right time to be thinking about extending the statutory minimum entitlement for annual leave, certainly not in the current economic part of the economic cycle. We share common values with the Green Party when it comes to improving the lot of workers. I don't think now's the right time for that, though.
Just to Annika's point, how worried are you though that people just don't care about the numbers stacking up based on the change of government?
Nobody's voted yet.
Do you accept
Being accountable mean to?
I think it means being here. It means continuing to answer questions. It means actually trying really hard to answer questions and to be transparent and honest as Prime Minister. That's what I have tried to do the entire time that I have been in politics. I don't walk away from the media. I don't walk away from scrutiny. I believe that it's an important part of democracy. I think when you get to the point where you're just walking away from scrutiny, you clearly have something to hide.
On accountability, you would have seen the protest group when you arrived. RN's spoken to some who say that the Labour leadership has been a roadblock to progress on migrant worker protections. What's your response to that?
I don't agree with that. I think we've been very focused on trying to improve the lot of migrant workers in New Zealand and to make sure that we're cracking down on and getting rid of migrant worker exploitation, which we know has happened in New Zealand in the past, and clearly there is evidence that there is some of that happening now as well. We are absolutely committed to stamping that out.
Do you accept though that there is more to do? What more would you like to do in that space? Because they're clearly not happy.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've got underway at the moment, and you would have seen the Minister of Immigration has announced this, is we've got a review underway of how some of the migrant exploitation has been allowed to take place under the Accredited Employer Work Scheme, because that is designed to stop migrant worker exploitation. So that review is very important. The reason we introduced that scheme in the first place was to stop unscrupulous employers exploiting migrants. The fact that there is evidence that some of them have been able to do that under the Accredited Employer Work Programme is very concerning. And so the review that's taking place now will identify how that happens so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Can you expand on your concerns with respect to the feasibility of the Greens policy given the current economic conditions?
I just don't think that now is the right time to impose that additional burden, particularly on employers. Extra annual leave entitlement would be a cost, and particularly to small business. We have already, imposed significant additional costs on small business when it comes to minimum wage increases, which we're going to continue to do, implementing, extra sick leave, a new public holiday, and I'm very mindful of that, and so I'm not proposing to increase, statutory annual leave entitlements at this point.
Do you think it could lead, policy enacting that by the end of 2025, do you think that could lead to small businesses in particular going out and go bust?
Look, that's really a question for those who are proposing that policy. I'm just saying it's not a priority for us at the moment.
Lead to small businesses, going bust if it was implemented?
I'll let the Greens answer the policy questions on their own policy. What I'm saying is it's not a priority for us at the moment, so really it's up to them to answer the questions on that.
Illegal starting out and training wage also increase costs of businesses.
In that particular case, it's actually a question of fairness. Young people working alongside older workers doing exactly the same work shouldn't be paid less simply because of their age.
Have you done any forecasts about what those additional costs could be on businesses?
We're relatively small.
Have you seen any evidence of any collusion between elements of the real estate industry and the National Party over the foreign buyer tax?
Look, I wouldn't want to speculate on that, Richard.
But you can look at their donations. I mean, there are some big donations from real estate companies in the National Party donation.
And I think New Zealanders can form their own conclusions about who National is focused on. It's clearly not the interests of first home buyers. It's clearly not the interests of minimum wage workers or the people who are, struggling to get ahead and to be able to buy a house.
So what's Labor going to do for first home buyers then? What's a new policy that you think is going to work over the next 3 years if you're re-elected?
Well, look, we'll announce further housing policy in due course. We've still got a little bit more to come in this election campaign, but we are focused on making sure that house prices stabilise in New Zealand, and they have. We're focused on making sure that New Zealand first home buyers get prioritised over overseas-based home buyers, which is exactly what we have done. That's working. We have been, very focused on making sure that we are aspiring to be a nation of homeowners rather than a nation of renters.
How much responsibility do you take for house prices spiralling out of control over the last 2 or 3 years?
We've got to increase housing supply. One of the biggest things that's led to the explosion in house prices in New Zealand, which incidentally in the post-pandemic period, house prices have gone up internationally around the world, but particularly one of the features in New Zealand that's contributed to that has been a shortage of housing. We've had record numbers of building consents. We've got a lot of work on building new public houses, record numbers of those being built now. Well, not since the 1950s have we built as many as we're building now. Just yesterday I was in Porirua where we were looking at a large-scale building development being overseen by Kāinga Ora, which contains a mix of affordable houses for first home buyers and public house rentals. Those sorts of programs will make a difference in terms of making more affordable houses available for those first home buyers.
Policy today focused on extending the living wage to health and education workers. Isn't this what we promised in 2020?
We've been working towards that, but there's still work to be done. The work of government is never done. That job's not finished, and we're committed to finishing it.
Why didn't it reach those workers in health and education when it reached other areas of the public service?
So if you look at some of the workforces that we're talking about, we have to actually have a mechanism to ensure that the pay flows through to workers in that sector. So let's take early childhood education, where we've been working towards pay parity for early childhood education workers. There's a similar issue there to what there is for many living wage workers, and that we've got to make sure that the extra funding we put into that actually flows through into better paying conditions for those workers. And when you're not necessarily funding wages, but you're funding the delivery of a particular service, you've got to make sure that you've got mechanisms to ensure that that money flows through. And that's the same with a lot of the contracted workers and the health workforce as well.
You say that only this cost to filling those raise youth wages. Have you done any?
We know
Sorry,
how
was
many.
that? Yeah, Carmel, I'll let you.
Well, we do know that actually most employers don't even pay the training wage or the youth wage. I think only around 10,000 are currently being paid it. And so, of course, the cost of that will be shared across the businesses that are still currently paying that, if that's removed and then they are put on the adult minimum wage. But in the scheme of things, 10,000 is not a lot. And it just goes to show that actually businesses and employers value their workers overall and are actually paying fairly in most circumstances, and there's no need for this.
Have you actually done anything?
Well, we know there's 10,000 people that are currently getting it. Well, the advice that we've got is that it should not have any significant or even slight impact on the employability of those young people.
Can I get your comment at the ASB Great Finance Debate in Queenstown a couple of days ago?
Which I haven't seen, by the way.
You haven't seen.
Yeah.
So Jack Tam was asking a question about how much National would fund the Ministry of Pacific Peoples, and David Seymour joked that under National would need to increase the security funding for that ministry. Everyone laughed, including Grant Robertson, so it's a continuation of that Ministry of Pacific Peoples joke. Can I get your response to that? I mean, is it funny? Is it exceptional?
It's not funny. It's just become ridiculous, I think, more than anything else. And I can imagine that some people are probably laughing out of frustration and the fact that this is ridiculous that he's been allowed to continue to say these things. I mean, surely he's got something better to focus on than continuing to put the boot in to one of our really important population group agencies.
Is it dangerous, though? I think there was a sense from people watching the debate that everyone in the room laughed, that politicians on the stage laughed.
It's always dangerous when someone, exhibits some kind of bullying behaviour and then turns around and says, "I was just joking." It's not funny.
Do you think Grant was laughing at it?
I probably, out of the ridiculousness of the fact that this is carrying on, I can imagine that even after all of the negative feedback that David Seymour has received, that David Seymour continues to do it. So I can imagine if Grant did, it would have been just out of how can this even continue and be continuing?
The Prime Minister. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, you
sorry,
haven't
no.
watched it. You haven't watched it. I mean, what have you got against Grant Robertson? Doesn't he deserve your support?
Grant always has our support. We're not saying anything against Grant Robertson, so I don't know where you're going with that.
It's a priority to check out what.
There's a lot of debates happening at the moment, and I don't get the chance to watch all of them. I'll be participating in a few of them.
Is it feasible that the likes of these real estate agents that are donating to the National Party, is it feasible that they're buying policy?
That's really a question for the National Party.
But could it happen? I mean, I don't like the people who donate to Labour, do they get policy in exchange for money?
Absolutely not.
So could that happen with the real estate agent like the Baileys? They want lots of money, they want commissions for these networks from these
We have transparency around political donations so that New Zealanders can form their own views on that. I'm not going to cast any particular aspersions in that regard, but I don't think, clearly from their actions, the National are prioritising the interests of Kiwi first home buyers.
Do you think Luxon and Willis are lying when they say that they're not going to cut health and education spending, or they're just useless?
There is simply no way that they could, cut the billions and billions of dollars of public sector spending that they're proposing to without cutting into services like health and education, and they've not produced any evidence to demonstrate that they could.
So do you think that they know that, or do you think that they are not considering it out of economic incompetence?
Well, I think the reason that they're not releasing their costings and their tax plan is that they just know that they don't add up, and they know that the claims. Well, they know that the claim. I think they know that the claims that they're making, that they're not going to cut health and education and that they can make their numbers add up, I think that they know that that's not true.
A youth mental health worker, she was actually trying to photo bomb you with the youth mental health sign back there. She says she doesn't care who wins the election, she just wants youth mental health to be prioritised. Would Labour consider like a cross-party working group on that just to take politics out of kids dying?
I think issues around mental health, I would love to see less politics involved in the debate around mental health. We've been building a whole lot of new mental health services, including ones focused at young people from the ground up. I look at the youth mental health services being provided in schools now, most of which didn't exist 6 years ago, but there's still more work work to be done there. Not all of the kids who need access to those services are getting them. So we absolutely want to continue the momentum. I think about Mana Ake, for example. I know what a difference that's making to young people. The Access and Choice program, which has seen 1 billion counselling sessions delivered so far for free through primary healthcare providers, that didn't exist before we became the government, and now there's been 1 million sessions delivered through it. More than that, actually, it's growing day by day. And I would love to take some of the politics out of that so that we can continue the momentum on those regardless.
If National met you halfway, would you commit to a bipartisan approach?
Bipartisan approaches generally tend to be quite hard to achieve 4 weeks out from a general election, but regardless of the election, but regardless of the election outcome, I think we need to do a better job around mental health in New Zealand. I'm absolutely committed to doing that.
On the first TV debate, just looking at the pre-food and looking at your forward forecasts on health, they're very tight, probably less than the rate of inflation over the next 2 years. How are you going to manage that? Are you not going to make some cuts yourself?
No, they're certainly not. The rate of inflation is coming back down. If you look at the most recent Treasury forecasts contained in the pre-fu, it shows that we'll be back within the target range by the second half, or within the second half of next year. And in fact, we'll see further significant reductions before the end of this year as well. That's what the Treasury's projections are showing. That does mean that we can budget for more normal sort of increases in government spending for wage growth and so on, rather than the significant increases that we've seen in recent years, which of course have been also driven by inflation.
Have you managed to...
significant gaps in the health service at the moment, long waiting times and services that are not able to be delivered. How are you going to accommodate them if you're so tight with your forecasts?
So the Treasury release, as part of their, I can't remember which part of the document release process they do it. They release their projections of what they think health and education in particular need, just in order to maintain the status quo. And I'm confident that we will be able to meet that within our fiscal plan.
But that's not the point. The point is, what can you do to make up the backlog and the bits that are missing, rather than just maintaining the status quo?
Well, we're already doing that. So if you think about health, for example, we're clearing the backlog of weight, that built up under COVID-19. I think everyone will accept that with the hospitals, in some cases, more or less shut down or reduced in terms of the services that they were providing, that a backlog for care emerged. We've got, by the end of this year, we will have everything other than orthopaedics down to a waiting time of less than a year. By middle of next year, we expect orthopaedics to be in that category as well. And then Dr. Verrill has set out the time frame for when we expect the wait times to be down, in some cases as low as 4 months. So that's certainly what we're working towards, and we're able to do that because we have put that extra funding into the health system. So when National talks about wasteful spending, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about the extra money that we are putting into the health system and into the education system, and I'm proud of our track record of investing in those things.
A couple of days away from the first televised leaders debate, how realistically, how much do you think that can change your personal and your party's polling fortunes?
Look, I know this will sound cliched, but there is one poll that matters, and that is when everybody has the opportunity to vote. Of course, I look at polls, and we're not where we want to be. But I'm going to get out of bed every morning between now and the election to change that, and to make sure that when people do vote, that they're aware of what they're voting on. They're aware of what the risks are of National's plan, which is falling apart more and more by the day. And they see that from the Labour Party, they're getting commitments that they can trust, and they're getting leaders that they can trust.
Did you see New Nations Central poll this morning?
I saw a screenshot. Someone sent it through. Yeah.
30, 28, 26.
Yeah.
Was that what you were expecting?
Wellington Central, the Greens always do quite well in those urban electorates, and Wellington Central is, James Shaw used to stand there and has done quite well in that electorate in the past. I think the really clear message is, if you want to keep National out, then vote for Ibrahim.
Did you expect it to be that tight? Expect Ibrahim to have a little bit more of a lead?
Look, for the feedback that we've been getting is that Ibrahim is doing very well there as a candidate. I would always caution about individual electorate polls. They are no politician ever gets brownie points for questioning the validity of polls, but we've done electorate polls ourselves in the past, and they are always the more volatile because the sample sizes are smaller. I'm confident that Ibrahim will win that seat.
Do you have internal polling on that electorate?
I haven't done, not on that seat, no.
We do need to go soon because
Yeah.
we need to be at the Tongan thing in
Okay.
like 1 minute.
All right.
Do you have anything else left up your sleeve for this election campaign to sway voters?
We've still got policies still to announce. Yeah, the campaign has still got several weeks before people start voting.
Some big ones?
There's more policies to come.
On the debate, do you see it as a chance for Labour to claw back some support and for you to stand there and shred who is a first MP?
I think Christopher Luxon's going to be a formidable debater. I know that he's been on the campaign trail for over 6 months now, practicing his lines and getting out there and rehearsing. I've never won any debating awards, but look, he's clearly trying to lower expectations. I think what it shows is that he's really worried about the fact that he knows that his numbers don't add up and that he's going to be challenged on that. He wouldn't be trying to lower expectations if he was confident that what he was saying actually stacked up.
You would also have observed though that he is not as solid in a stand-up. He's been around in politics far less longer. He sticks to his lines more closely. I mean, you must see that you're going in with an advantage here, or are you saying that you're less?
People can form their own judgments on that, but what I would say is that answering questions, dealing with the media every day, and being accountable for your actions is integral to being Prime Minister. It is what the job is.
Will he crack under the pressure?
Well, let's wait and see.
Are you worried about debate?
You looked a little glazed over during some of that. You were good.
Yeah, I'm great. I don't agree with that characterisation, Lloyd. There are very long days, and I think everyone will appreciate that there are very long days, and nobody is switched on every moment of every minute of every day, but I'm really enjoying the campaign trail.
Got a ticket for the game tonight?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Up the wires.
Yes.
All right, thanks everyone.
Sorry?